Welcome back. It's been a long time, but we got episode 9 of 585 Takes podcast. You'll be joining Garrett and I. We're going to go through the Jaylen Brown trade, which was just a horrendous move by the Celtics front office. Then we're going to hoop onto the LaMelo trade. And then we're talking, of course, LeBron James. It feels like we're talking about him every single episode, but at the end of the day, it is LeBron James, and he has been quite the diva, taking a sweet old time deciding on a team. So, Garrett, I'm going to let you start off quickly with the Jaylen Brown trade. What are we thinking?
Well, before we get to any of that, can we take a moment to celebrate the 2026 Summer League champions, the Golden State Warriors, and Summer League MVP Axel Lendeborg? I was in Spectrum Center where the Charlotte Hornets play a few months ago. I was down there for the ACC tournament, and I think the Hornets. I don't think they had a banner hung, but they made a pretty big deal about winning Summer League because they don't have many trophies to show for down there. But that was a wonderful game last night. Axel Lendeborg proving why he was taken in the lottery and going to be impactful for the Warriors. But no, talking about the Jaylen Brown trade.
Hold up, Garrett. Before you move on, I promise you, the Warriors and the Hornets are two very different franchises. The Warriors will not be hanging up any banners for that.
Yeah, I'd be pretty disappointed if I saw a Summer League banner go
Yeah,
up in Chase Center. But going back to the Jaylen Brown trade, it was one of those trades. We see these trades a lot in the NBA where it's just a financial decision where you look at the players in exchange for picks or different players and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And it has a lot to do with financial. I think that had some to do with this trade, but Brad Stevens is one of the smartest GMs, executives the NBA has, and he has been for a while since he was the coach all the way back in Butler with Gordon Hayward, taking them to back-to-back national championships. He has talked to anybody. They think he's one of the smartest basketball minds. I just feel like I'm missing something in this trade. Like he or the Celtics organization or somebody somehow involved with Jaylen Brown knows something that we don't. Because Jaylen Brown for Paul George, what was it, 2 pick swaps and 2 second-round picks, is a
yep.
complete steal for the Sixers, in my opinion. I thought this was one of the most lopsided trades in the history of the NBA. And I just don't see the reasoning for why the Celtics did this. I know that they had sort of tipped their hand and showed that, okay, Jaylen Brown's now on the trade block, so teams didn't have to offer them as much. But if I'm the Celtics, 10 times out of 10, I'm just keeping him on the roster and working through some of the saga and playing with this roster than getting 4 sort of meaningless picks and Paul George in return.
Yeah, 100%. This was a completely asinine trade for the Celtics. I mean, Paul George, I understand the money aspect, maybe because I think Paul George has one more year on his contract, but he does have a player option after that. But he has still one more year with $54 million, which is grossly overpaid. Meanwhile, the Sixers now have Jaylen Brown locked up until the 2029 season. So they got a few years with Jaylen Brown and just an elite starting 5 over there, especially, I don't want to speak too soon, but if they do get a LeBron James, that would change everything. But no, I mean, I don't know if we're missing anything or if it's just the fact that they showed their cards and the league kind of didn't jump on Jaylen Brown like maybe the Celtics were hoping for. We've heard the reports come out that the GMs across the NBA didn't value Jaylen Brown as high as a lot of the media or myself, along with a lot of the other fans, would. I still think this is a pretty putrid return for somebody that was just in the MVP talks, as well as a Finals MVP just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the timeline of this trade is definitely interesting because, Jaylen Brown's been doing his Twitch thing now for a little bit where he goes on Twitch, his streams, and he just talks kind of out loud. And I mean, it's kind of enjoyable because he's truthful. He says what's on his mind. And so after the season ends, he goes on there and he says, this was the most enjoyable season of my career. He got to be the guy. Tatum was out for most of the playoffs. He led what I think we can both and most NBA fans can agree on, a pretty underwhelming Celtics team to 50-plus wins in the regular season. This wasn't a team that was expected to do anything. It was supposed to be a retooling year. It was supposed to be a gap year for the Celtics. And instead, Brown led them to the number 2 seed in the East. And then they get up 3-1. Tatum comes back, obviously, and they lose to, actually, Paul George and the 76ers because, frankly, for a game or two in that series, they had nobody within any range of stopping Joel Embiid. He was just taking over, and they come back and win that series. And so then the season ends. Like I said, Brown makes those comments on Twitch, and his name is thrown in the Giannis trade. It feels like it's inevitable that Giannis is going to end up in Boston, that Jaylen Brown's going to go to Milwaukee, probably get bought out, probably get traded, something from there. I don't think anybody thought he was going to play in Milwaukee. But then the Heat trade for Giannis, and so the Celtics are left with Brown. And I think me and you are sitting here like, listen, yeah, they blew a 3-1 lead, but now Tatum's going to have a full offseason of being healthy. They're going to get their chemistry back. This duo has won an NBA Finals 3 years ago. It's not like it was a decade ago. It was pretty recently. And I know that those role players around them had a lot to do with that, and they had a stacked team, but those two were the core of the team. And then all of a sudden, we hear this trade rumor, not rumor, confirmed news that Jaylen Brown's going to the Sixers for that kind of return. And listen, Paul George still has some good basketball in him, I believe. He's going to give you what? Less than half the games in the regular season, and he's going to give you one or two good playoff games a series, if that. And so it's just a really mind-boggling trade, and the Celtics' reasoning for it was partly financially and partly that, oh, well, Jaylen Brown's actually a negative on the court analytically. And we hear this one NBA guy was like, oh, he would be the seventh best guy on a championship team right now. It's like, what? Like the seventh best guy on a championship team? That's not true at all. Like, I understand analytics and numbers play a big story, and especially in today's NBA. But in what world is Jaylen Brown the seventh best player on a championship team? You can't show me a stat that proves that. And I know that Jason Tatum has been the more efficient scorer when given the team in previous years as opposed to Jaylen Brown this past year, but there's just no world you can convince me that Jaylen Brown is valued at Paul George, 2 pick swaps, and 2 second rounders.
This is the exact reason why there's so many people saying that the analytical and the number side of the game is ruining the game. Because, like you said, someone had mentioned that Jaylen Brown would be the seventh best on the championship team. Meanwhile, a couple years ago, he just won Finals MVP. Now, I know that doesn't always mean that you are the best player on that team. Usually it does. And in that case, in that playoff series and in that entire playoff run, I do think he was the best player on that Celtics team. There's a reason he also won the Eastern Conference MVP in that playoff run. As well as this, the inefficiency, sure, he does that. He's kind of turnover centric. However, this year he did shoot 48% and 35% from three-point range, averaging 29 points. So that is extremely efficient for a guard of his size, being the number one threat on a team without a Robin like Tatum to take off some of that stress. But yeah, we see some of those analytics showing, like, I believe he was eighth in plus minus on the Celtics roster, which, yeah, it definitely jumps out at you. But I can't just ignore all of his gameplay due off of one single stat.
Yeah, and what's polarizing about the NBA is all the time we have these players who maybe it's a guy who averages 30 on a bad team and nobody thinks he's really good. We'll get to talk about LaMelo in a second. And it's like, where do you stack these guys up? And Jaylen Brown was one of those guys where some people were putting him in their top 10 or a fringe top 10 NBA player. And I don't think he's up there in that fringe top 10, but he's also not he's not a top 30 or top 40 guy. Like, he's in the top 20 of NBA players right now in the league. And
Easily,
so we
easily.
cannot overrate him, but at the same time, we can't just completely underrate him because we fall in love with one or two statistics. Like you mentioned, less than 3 years ago, 2024, the NBA Finals, who was holding up the MVP trophy? It was Jaylen Brown. Like, this is somebody who, yeah, maybe Tatum is the Celtics' best player. I'm not denying that. He's a more efficient scorer. Maybe the Celtics organization was like, listen, we need to build around Tatum and not Brown. And if Brown's not okay with that, then we have to get rid of him. But that was the return. That was all you could have gotten. I mean, have a conversation with Brown and figure something else out before you trade him for that, because that was just malpractice, in my opinion, as an NBA executive, as a return for that. And, I know we have texted about it back and forth a little bit, but in the past few years, it's been the Western Conference. All the talent felt like it was out there, and it was no one from the East is going to compete. And this last year, the Knicks obviously won the NBA Finals, but we didn't feel like the East has great depth at all. Now with Giannis getting moved to the Heat, with some of these other teams making big splashes, with LeBron's name being floated around in Cleveland and Philadelphia and Miami, the East is a good conference. I still think the West is better, but the East is really getting good. And the Celtics now, without Jaylen Brown and with Paul George instead, in my opinion, are the fifth or sixth best team in the East right now.
Yeah, I would have to agree, which is crazy because You can call me crazy for this. I know they just blew a 3-1 lead with both their guys, but I do believe with a full season of Jason Tatum being healthy and if Jaylen Brown returned, I do still think the Celtics would be the number one team come playoff time in the Eastern Conference. And now, yeah, I'd probably put them around that 4 and 5 spot, which is pretty ridiculous and a massive fall off. And yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. I think that word of malpractice is perfect to describe Brad Stevens because what he did was just utterly ridiculous. I don't know how you can go from being such a sought after and great GM for this franchise for so many years to just gift wrapping a player of Jaylen Brown's caliber to a team in your own division. You're going to see him 4 to 5 times this year, not even counting the playoffs. If they run into each other in the playoffs, they may see each other over double digits amount, and that's Jaylen Brown. If there's one guy that I'd have to assume in the entire NBA is going to hold revenge on his shoulders more than anyone else, it's that man right there. And if he wins a game and plays well against the Celtics, you can promise that he'll be up on that Twitch right after that game.
And it's not just a divisional team. Like you trade him to the Nets, it's like okay, the
It's a
Sixers are one
rival.
of the Celtics' rivals. Like that is a
Yeah.
growing rivalry, and it's been for the past few years, ever since Embiid got to Philadelphia and they became relevant again. And just real quick, running through it, looking at their own division now, the Knicks as reigning NBA champions. I know that they lost Mitchell Robinson to the Celtics. I think the Knicks are a better team than the Celtics.
Yep.
I think the Sixers are a better team than the Celtics. Now that Jaylen Brown's there, I if Kawhi is in Toronto, watching Toronto battle the Cavs, it felt like they were, a guy like Kawhi Leonard away from making a deeper run in the East. I think there's a valid argument that the Raptors might be better. The
And
Cavs, I don't think you can easily say that the Celtics are better than the Cavs. The Pistons, we can both agree, have taken a step back. They just haven't really done anything this offseason. The Pacers are going to be coming back and trying to make a move, and I think the Heat with Giannis are now better than the Celtics. So that's at least 4 or 5 teams I just listed that are better than the Celtics. It's probably still a playoff team, but maybe next year is going to be the gap year.
yeah, no, I mean, I'd have to hesitate on the Miami Heat. I don't think they're a well built enough roster to compete with the Celtics in a 7 game series. That's unless they get LeBron, then we're gonna have to see where it goes from there. I do think the pickup of Hardaway Jr. was massive for them, space them out a little bit, but I think we're ready to move on to the Western Conference and LaMelo Ball. So Garrett, take it away. What do we think about the Timberwolves? Because I think we can kind of just forego the Charlotte Hornets with all due respect.
Well, first, just real quick on the Hornets. Well, they obviously made a big leap this year in that playing game to get the 8th seed where they lost to the Magic. I thought this was a great trade for them because I didn't think they were like a year or two away. I think they need to give their young guys more time to develop, especially like they're just so young and they needed to let them develop. And by getting LaMelo Ball out of the picture, that's going to happen. And it just felt like we both know LaMelo's never going to be the number one option on an NBA champion. And so for the Hornets, maybe they delayed, getting to the 7 or 8 seed by a year or two, but I like this long term for them much better. And if I'm a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, I would be very worried right now. I would be shaking in my boots because there's a man in Minnesota and he's starting to get impatient, and his name is Anthony Edwards. And we saw that with this last year where Julius Randle, bye bye. Like it wasn't working. We got to a couple of conference finals, and then this past year, I know Ant was hurt, but they beat the Nuggets in the first round. They lose to the Spurs in the second round, and you can't tell me Ant didn't talk to somebody in the Timberwolves front office and say, "Hey, listen, Julius Randle isn't the answer. Can we get him out of here?" And so he goes. Then they trade away Naz Reid, which was really puzzling to me. And then they bring in LaMelo Ball for a backcourt, which I mean, you've seen all the stuff on social media about how it's going to be some of the most entertaining post-game interviews ever between those two. But with Rudy Gobert as the only, the only front court option they have right now that I could see starting for a playoff team, I'd be very worried that Anthony Edwards said, listen, we got to make this happen right now. And I think the Timberwolves panicked a little bit and saw that with the star power that LaMelo offers, they realized they could get him and pair him with him. I don't think it's going to work out very well, and I'm be shocked if they won more than one playoff series. And if we're being honest, I think we're on the clock for Edwards' time in Minnesota. I don't see him being there more than 2 more seasons.
Yeah, it's such a tough situation to be if you are a Timberwolves executive because, like you said, and he's getting impatient. So you feel as if you have to make a move to get him to stay. Now you pick up LaMelo, who there have been reports that LaMelo and Ant they're good buddies, which I mean, obviously I don't know either of them, but it makes sense if you kind of just go off of their two personas. However, on the basketball court is a very different world because you can be best buddies outside, but if you're not winning enough games to really be in contention, then they're not going to be the best of buds. And I don't know if it does it for them. I really don't think it does. They did finish last year with the sixth seed, I believe, in the Western Conference. I think this year, if I had to guess, I would put them at 5, maybe 4, because I do think they'll jump the Lakers. I think the Lakers are going to fall. And then the Rockets, it's just I have no idea what's going to happen with them. I think the Rockets are going to stay above the Wolves, but I think the Wolves will jump the Lakers and take that 5 spot. Because at the end of the day, they did pick up a score. LaMelo Ball was number 2 in total three-pointers made last season. Now, I know he was behind his fellow running mate, Concanopoulos. And the year before that, who was number 1? Anthony Edwards. So those are 2 elite threats from behind the arc. And now Anthony Edwards doesn't always constantly have to create the shot for himself. He can rely off LaMelo Ball's playmaking to get him some open looks. And while he may not always play the power forward position, Jaden McDaniels, he's long, he's lengthy. He may be able to stretch out and play that 4 spot. And one thing I will say about Ant, he's very childish in a lot of moments. But from what I've seen of him, he is a amazing teammate. I mean, you watch his press conferences, he's always picking up his guys. And I think a guy like LaMelo Ball could definitely use that because if Ant's a child, LaMelo's a baby. So it's going to be interesting to see how those guys work. I think Chris Finch has the workload out for him, and I don't know how he's going to deal with those 2 guys.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see like what the play style looks like because these are 2 guys that want the ball in their hands and that kind of need the ball in their hands to put up the stats that they're used to putting up. At first when you said 4 or 5 seed, I was like, really? You think they're going to be better than they were last year? But this feels like a team that's built more for the regular season if those 2 are healthy than the playoffs, where I could actually see them putting up a decent regular season record and then getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs because I just don't think that LaMelo Ball is necessarily a postseason guy when it becomes more of a half-court game and the defense tightens up. I would like to go into the Minnesota Timberwolves headquarters and just ask around to see what else they tried and what else they explored because we saw Giannis get moved. We saw Kawhi Leonard get moved pending whatever illegal thing went on with him and Steve Ballmer in Los Angeles. We've heard all the talk about LeBron. He still hasn't signed yet. I mean, I think we can cross Minnesota off the list of places he's going to go. But there was plenty of guys that got moved this offseason, Jaylen Brown, that I think were all better fits in Minnesota than LaMelo Ball was. So were they really that desperate where they tried all these guys and it was like, no, and they're like, we have to make a move? Or did they pick out LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards was like, yeah, I want to play with that dude? And they were like, you know what, we got to go for it because if we just sit here and be conservative, then our franchise players are going to walk in a couple seasons. And, like you mentioned, the talk with Anthony Edwards when he first came into the league was, does he love basketball enough? Does he want it enough? And that's the one thing you cannot question about his game is, does he play hard? I believe he's one of the hardest players in the NBA. And, we saw him with the comment of like, what if a kid saves up money and goes to one NBA game and I'm just sitting on the bench? Like he wants to be on the floor as much as he can. And so it's going to be a fun team to follow in the regular season. But I think when we come to April and May and we get into the thick of the NBA playoffs, I don't think the Timberwolves are going to be making a deep run.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there's one basketball on the court, and these 2 are going to be trying to share the basketball, like 2 siblings share a Netflix account. It just may not be plausible. And when it comes to Anthony Edwards and his career, it's scary. I have a trepidation that he may never get all the way and win that championship if he stays with the Timberwolves. I know it's very early in his career, but you could compare him to a guy like Allen Iverson, who had all the talent in the world to win a championship, just never had the guys and the situation around him, especially with the conference he was in, to get it done. And if Anthony Edwards stays in the Western Conference, I mean, these teams are good and young. The Spurs, the Thunder, those are 2 of the best teams, I think, in the entire NBA, and they're babies. They're only going to continue getting better. And then I still think the Nuggets are much better than the Wolves. I know the Wolves have the Nuggets number. I understand that. However, I do think with this whole switch up, the Wolves always played a very hard style of basketball against the Nuggets. They fouled a ton. And I know plenty of fouls were called, but trust me, they fouled more than the calls that were given to them. And giving up Nas Reed and getting LaMelo Ball, that only makes your team softer. And I don't know if that's what you need against a team like the Nuggets. And then the Rockets, that's an extremely interesting matchup. I don't know if they're better than the Wolves. I honestly don't think they are, just because I think Anthony Edwards' star power lifts them up above the Rockets. But those top two, top three teams in the Western Conference, in my opinion, are the top three teams in the entire NBA. And I don't know if that's a hill that they can get over.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting, and it's going to be a really fun watch. The Timberwolves this season, maybe more than in past years. But moving on from Nas Reed and Randall, it'll be interesting to see what else they do to fill out the front court depth because as much as Rudy Gobert is a viable center, I think he's not a scoring center, so they don't have a guy who can score the ball down low or a big man who can really shoot it from outside either. They used a lot of the money they cleared up to extend Ayo Dosunmu, so they have the guards filled fine. They're going to need some front court pieces to I don't know, maybe guard guys like Victor Wembanyama in the Western Conference.
You know
But
who I think could fit very well with this Wolves team? Carl Anthony Towns. I think
Karl
he'd be a
Anthony
great
Towns.
fit.
Yeah, I think he would be, a solid fit. But I mean, DiVincenzo is going to be missing a good at least half of the season coming off the injury. But again, another guard. Um, do you want to talk LeBron now? Is it time?
Yes, let's talk LeBron. I mean, we've hinted his name a couple times already. It's the GOAT. It's LeBron, so it's going to happen. However, I want to start off with my opinion on where he's going to, not where he's going to go, but what happens if he does go anywhere. So, what we've heard is LeBron has narrowed down to the Eastern Conference. He's going to end up in the Eastern Conference. And here's my take. I think whatever team LeBron goes to in the Eastern Conference is immediately catapulted to the favorite in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I mean, if we're down to what are we saying, the Cleveland, Philly, or Miami, I'm assuming if it's in the East.
Yep, Cleveland, Philly, Miami.
I'm still not quite sold if you went to Miami on them being the favorites. The biggest need for them is depth and shooting. And I mean, obviously, adding another player checks off at least some of it. I don't think it solves the depth, but it gives them better depth. And LeBron's not one of those guys that solves shooting woes. Yes, he can shoot the ball, but if you need shooting, you don't go out and acquire LeBron. So when the process started as a Warriors fan, I was bought into all the hype, and I honestly did think he wanted to go play with Steph. We saw it at the All Star game a few years ago. We see, Draymond's texting him, trying to recruit him. It feels like he's bought into the Warriors. And then some time goes by, and he's in Cleveland, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's back home. He's in Cleveland. He's going to go to the Cavs. And then it's like, actually, he goes to Cleveland every summer, and he's always there. And then he goes to New York, and the rumor comes out where if they hadn't won the championship, he would go to the Knicks. And I don't know 100% if I believe that, but it certainly was an option. And then it feels like some more time goes by, and then the Heat's name gets mentioned, and all of a sudden it comes back to the Warriors. And now his daughter is the most important in his decision, and all of her friends being in California and Golden State, the only out of those four teams, the only one in California. And so there's just been so many conflicting reports about LeBron making this decision. And you said it before we came on air. You think with the World Cup going on, he kind of wanted to wait for the world to move on from soccer and focus their attention back on him. And I can't disagree with you. It feels like that's probably what he's waiting for, because at some point, if he wants to win, you need to sign somewhere so that they can fill in. I mean, if it's the Warriors, like they need to fill out some more roster spots. They need to they need to like sign some other guys to fill in proper roles around him. And so it's really just been so much drama, and the fact that we're getting these ESPN notifications and reports that he's not ready to announce yet, where it's like, can we just get the one when he does announce? It's kind of starting to annoy me, and I think a lot of the NBA community, where technically he doesn't have to announce until he feels ready to. It could be tomorrow, it could be in another month or two, but I think for him, in his best interest to win, it would be sooner rather than later. I want him obviously to come to the Warriors, but I think my official prediction is that he goes home one last time to Cleveland.
Yeah, if we're talking strictly predictions, I'll give it to you. I also believe that Cleveland is the spot he's going to end up. However, getting back to that Miami, I know that they were just a playing team. However, they're not exactly the same team. I understand they lost some shooting with Norman Powell, but they also picked up a guy by the name of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who averages 30 in his sleep. And they re-signed Andrew Wiggins. I know, we're not going to act like he's the greatest player of all time. They got Bobby
Hey,
Portis in the trade.
I'm a Wiggins fan.
They
He
got
helped us win a championship.
Yeah, of course you're a Wiggins fan. That was the best basketball he's ever played in his life, helping the Warriors win a championship, besides maybe his high school career. Bobby Portis, that man will spot up in the corner, and he will hit every single corner three that comes his way. So that spreads the floor a little bit. Then they got Tim Hardaway Jr. They recently signed him. That's another shooter. So, yes, they're lacking shooters dramatically. I 100% agree. But I'm not going to sit here and act as if they have not a single shooter on their team. They have a few guys that can put the ball in the hoop from deep range. And LeBron has continued to get better at that over his career. So I do think with a guy like LeBron, being in a spot he's familiar with Giannis, with Bam, I think that defense is just going to be so unbelievable that I do think that they'll be the favorite when it comes postseason time. I mean, we saw it with LeBron. Regular season, he averaged 21 a game. Postseason, 23, 7, and 7. And his usage rates just went up a ton, and he did it more efficiently while not having the Luka or Austin Reeves by his side. So I think LeBron's kind of at the point, I mean, he's 41 years of age, where he's kind of going to glide through the regular season. Then when it comes postseason, if he truly believes his team's got a shooter, got a boxer's chance, he's going to give it his all, and LeBron's all, even at the age of 41, is dangerous, especially if he's a third option.
Yeah, and I think that's where I kind of disagree with you is if he goes to the Warriors, as much as I'd like to say that that's such a fun team, and I think it would probably put us in the top 4 or 5. It's the issue with the Warriors is they're the most unk roster of all time. If he signs there, it's just going to be a bunch of like 40-year-old men.
Yeah,
running
Warriors
around.
are the favorite.
And so from that aspect, I don't like their chances of all being healthy and playing a lot of regular season games together, and thus their seeding is worse. However, if they all got healthy in the playoffs at the same time, I don't think they're the favorite, but I don't think it's the longest of long shots for them to make the finals. You go to the East, and I think that's where he can make a much bigger impact. I don't think the Heat should be the favorite, even really in the East if they sign LeBron. I just think they need more guards who can shoot, but also who can handle the ball and just more guard depth. I do think if he goes to the 76ers, that should be the favorite in the East because you look at the Sixers, what has been their issue? I mean, Embiid, the MVP of 3 years ago, he just can't stay healthy. And to bet on him being healthy feels like a long shot. But even without him, Maxey, Edgecombe, Jaylen Brown, and LeBron is enough, I think, to win the East. And then in Cleveland, I still don't know if he puts them over the edge. I mean, were the Cavs LeBron away from beating the Knicks? I mean, they very well could have been. They very well could have been. But at the same time, Donovan Mitchell, Harden, and LeBron, that doesn't sound like 3 guys who want to play together or who seem like they would be good playing together. So I think they'd have the talent if he went to Cleveland. I just don't know how it would all fit together. But I think Philly, then Cleveland, then probably Miami, and then Golden State is how I would rank them in terms of where he signs, their chances of winning a title after getting LeBron.
Yeah, I want to say one quick thing about Cleveland. I do believe that they were one LeBron James away from getting over the Knicks. Now, maybe they weren't going to beat the Spurs, but I do think that they were one LeBron away from going to the finals. Because of this, LeBron is not just a guy that you add to your team and he's a player. He's also a coach. And we've obviously shared our opinions on Kenny Atkinson on the show multiple
times. They're
not
losing that 22-point lead with LeBron James.
They're not with LeBron James, exactly. LeBron James, they're not blowing a 22-point lead in the fourth quarter. I don't care how many days they played in a row. I don't care if they were coming off an 11-game series and the Knicks had a full month off. LeBron James-led team is not blowing a 22-point lead in the playoffs. That's just a fact. As well as this, the Cleveland Cavaliers had 2 straight 7-game series before the Knicks. I think if you add a LeBron to that team, I don't think the Raptors series goes 7. I mean, when you play the Raptors and LeBron's in your team, it probably goes 4 or 5. And then even the next with the Pistons, I think that one's going 5, maybe 6. So now the Knicks don't have a full 10 days off. They have maybe 3 to 4 days off, and the Cavs didn't play 2 7-game series. They played a 5-game series and a 6-game series, so they still got their legs underneath them. I also think he inspires the guys. I mean, it's LeBron. You know, if you have LeBron on the team, you're playing for something much bigger than an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. You're playing for a championship. And maybe, I'm not saying it definitely would, but maybe it would take some of the weight off of James Harden's shoulders. He wouldn't have to be the guy. He'd obviously have to be a guy. He'd be the third guy on the offensive side of the ball, but he wouldn't be the second. He wouldn't be the primary ball handler because LeBron James would be. That LeBron James for the 2020 Lakers was one of the best point guards I've ever seen in my life, even at 6'9".
Yeah, I think it's a serious consideration if he does go to Cleveland to move James Harden to the bench and to let him run the second unit. Because, I mean, yeah, maybe it stirs the pot with him and his role a little bit, but if we're being honest, they shouldn't be starting LeBron, Mitchell, and Harden. There's just not enough basketballs. We only play with one in the NBA. And so I think moving Harden to the bench would be a much better option. Let him run the second unit, and it would allow him to play the way that he wants to play because he's played that way his whole NBA career. He's not an off-ball guy. And, maybe instead of being up 2-1 analytically, they would have had a 3-0 lead analytically with LeBron on their team. But, yeah, all jokes aside, I do think he could push the Cavs over the edge, and I just think it would be so cool to see him end his career where it all started and then where he delivered a championship, unfortunately, over the Warriors in 2016. But the verdict's still out there. We don't know where he's going to go. And if we're being honest, I'm not super confident in the Cavs or anywhere. It still feels like it's pretty up in the air, which usually, it's like Aaron Rodgers, but at least Rodgers, usually it's leaked by now, or it feels like we know where he's going. But with LeBron, we still kind of have no idea. But it's funny how so much the NBA offseason is riding on a 41-year-old's decision of where he's going to play next year.
Yeah, he's like Aaron Rodgers, except he actually makes the team he's going to better.
All right, not too much of my Steelers.
I couldn't say enough bad things about Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry. But I will say one more thing before we end. I think we're about ready to wrap it up. If LeBron James does go to the 76ers and he hoists the Larry O'Brien, he will become the first NBA player of all time to win a championship with 4 different NBA teams. So maybe that entices him to add another, statistic to his amazing career. But we'll see. I can't imagine that's the main contributor to where he's going to go. Just an interesting fact.
Yeah, because Jordan didn't win a title with 4 different teams.
Yeah, it stinks.
Another argument for the people who think LeBron is the GOAT, but that is both of us, but not going to be using that argument. Probably shouldn't make his decision based off that fact alone, but that would be kind of nuts to think about, winning a title and being the guy on at least 3 of those teams, but possibly a 4th, depending on how the playoff run goes, obviously. That will do it for episode 9 of the 585 Takes Sports podcast. We talked Jaylen Brown, one of the worst trades in NBA history. We can both agree on that. LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards are paired up in Minnesota, and we're still waiting on a decision from LeBron James.
Biggest diva in the NBA.
But make sure you guys check us out on social media. Drop a like, drop a follow, and until next time, peace.